if you think you're going to be a lot happier if you've got 2x instead of x, you're probably making a mistake. I mean, you ought to find something you like that works with that, and you'll get in trouble if you think that making 10x or 20x is the answer to everything in life, because then you will do things like borrow money when you shouldn't, or maybe cut corners on things that your employer wants you to cut corners on. Or it just doesn't make any sense. You won't like it when you look back on it. 3 things in hiring people: look for integrity, intelligence, and energy. And he said if the person didn't have the first 2, that the latter 2 would kill them, because if they don't have integrity, you want them dumb and lazy. You don't want them smart and energetic.
When I get to the courts, and, I have my bag and I'm wearing my hat and my hoodie. This is my office. Like, that's my workplace. And I'm laser focused. And I've had that. I mean, I think it's that mentality that whatever, I just have that tunnel vision, and that's how I go. And when I leave the courts, I got friends, family, jokes, fun. Like, when I get to my office, I close the door, and that's me.
That's you.
Yeah.
When I started Microsoft, I didn't think of it as all that risky. I mean, I was so excited about what we were doing. It's true I could have gone bankrupt, but I had a set of skills that were highly employable, and in fact, my parents were still willing to let me go back to Harvard and finish my education if I wanted to.
You've always got a job with me, Bill.
And the thing that was scary to me wasn't quitting and starting the company. It was when I started hiring my friends and they expected to be paid. And then we had customers who went bankrupt, customers that I'd counted on to come through. And so then I got this incredibly conservative approach that I wanted to have enough money in the bank to pay a year's worth of payroll, even if we didn't get any payments coming in. And I'm almost true to that the whole time. We have about 10 billion now, which is pretty much enough for the next year. Anyway, if you're going to start a company, it takes so much energy that it better overcome your feeling of risk. I don't think that you necessarily, if you're going to start a company, should do it at the start of your career. I think there's a lot to be said for working for a company, learning how they do things. If you're young, it's hard to go lease premises. They made that hard for me. You couldn't rent a car when you were under 25 at the time, so I was always taking taxis to go see customers. The people would, people say, well, we're going to go have a discussion in the bar. Well, I couldn't go to the bar. But that's fun, because I'll tell you, when people are first skeptical and they think, oh, this kid doesn't know anything, then when you show them you've really got a good product and you know something, they actually tend to go overboard and they think, whoa, they know a lot. Let's really do an incredible amount with these people. So our youth, at least in this country, was a huge asset for us once we reached a certain threshold. It is hard. It's hard to hire older people because they'll be a little bit conservative about whether they should come and take the risk. And it took 3 or 4 years before we could go out into the normal sort of employment pool. But those problems that come with starting a firm, you better think of those as part of the pleasure, part of the challenge that is part of the excitement.
It's in my head 24/7. There's nothing else I can think. I don't think about nothing else. If and that's it. I'm just curiously fascinated with it, and I can't stop thinking about it. Everything I do in my life is related to this. I don't do nothing else if it's not got to do with fighting. You know what I mean? And that is why. You know what I mean? To be true.
Is that nearly...
all you've got to do is show up.
Is that not unhealthy?
I don't know. Do I look unhealthy? Take a look at this physique. I'm in phenomenal shape, in body and mind. To me, what's unhealthy is living an unhealthy life. To me, what's unhealthy is getting up and going through the same day every day of your life, 9 to 5, in an office or in a... You know what I mean? That's unhealthy. That beats your mind. I don't work. I love what I do, and that's why I'm doing what I love. You know what I mean? That's why it's become a career for me, because I love it. I love what I do. So I don't think it's unhealthy. I feel good in my mind. I mean, it's my life.
Performing under pressure, whether it's me or anybody else, is the same. I have the same pressures as anyone else. There's time, there's performance, there's financial. I mean, there's deadlines. My pressures are not unique. The situations may be different, or but everybody has the same kinds of pressures. But what I found, or what I find fascinating, is the interpretation of the stimuli. Let me explain. So I was watching the Olympics, this last Summer Olympics, and I was amazed at how bad the questions were that the reporters would ask all the athletes. And almost always, they asked the same question, whether they were about to compete or after they competed. Were you nervous, right? And to a T, all the athletes went, no, right? And what I realized is it's not that they're not nervous, it's their interpretation of what's happening in their bodies. I mean, what happens when you're nervous, right? Your heart rate starts to go, you sort of get a little tense, you get a little sweaty, right? You have expectation of what's coming, and we interpret that as, I'm nervous. Now, what's the interpretation of excited? Your heart rate starts to go, you're anticipating what's coming, right? You get a little sort of like tense. It's all the same thing. It's the same stimuli, except these athletes, these Olympic quality athletes, have learned to interpret the stimuli that the rest of us would say is nervous as excited. They all say the same thing. No, I'm not nervous. I'm excited. And so I've actually practiced it just to tell myself when I start to get nervous that this is excitement. Yeah. And so I used to speak in front of a large audience, and somebody would say, how do you feel? I used to say, a little nervous. Now when somebody says, how do you feel? I'm like, really excited, actually. And it came from just sort of telling myself, no, this is excitement. And it becomes a little bit automatic later on. But it's kind of a remarkable thing to deal with pressure by interpreting what your body is experiencing as excitement rather than nerves. And it's really kind of effective. It makes you want to rush forwards rather than pull back, and yet it's the same experience.
Find your passion. You find your passion. I was very, very lucky to find it, when I was 7 or 8 years old, and fortunately, my children have found their passion. One son loves farming like nothing else. One son loves music like everything else, and all three of them love philanthropy and what they get to do. You're lucky in life when you find it, and you can't guarantee you're going to find it in your first job out. But I always tell college students that come out, I say, take the job that you would take if you were independently wealthy. You're going to do well at it.
Of the first ballet recitals that I danced in pointe shoes, and I was so nervous because it was the first time that I was going to get on stage. Everyone that I loved and care about was going to be in that audience. And I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want to let myself down. How I sort of learned to cope with that is just really to take that anxiety, that sort of adrenaline, and actually pour it into something productive, meaning like, what can you do to best prepare for that moment? So when it came to the point where it was showtime, it was time to get out on that stage, I knew that I did everything I possibly could to get out there and feel amazing and just perform. And I think something clicked in me. However, it doesn't always go right. There was a time, I remember I walked in a Fendi runway show, and I, made a little slip and kind of slipped off the runway. But all you can do is do your best. Even when you make mistakes, sometimes those can be the most important experiences to learn from.
So I would say the mindset that you have to have, you definitely have to be a little crazy. Your faith and your belief has to be crazy. You have to see what's not there and manifest it to be in there. But the mindset is that I was a dreamer. I started this whole thing as a dream. And then the day that I turned into the combination of a dreamer and a realist, that's when I started to really go, And that's saying, like, don't be afraid to close your eyes and dream, but then open your eyes and see the reality of what it's going to take for you guys to be successful. That mindset, that relentlessness, that craziness, and really facing reality of what it's going to take to achieve your dream is something that I think we all have to have if we really, really, really trying to get it, not trying to play around.
For like an entrepreneur, forget a salesperson, how about just an entrepreneur who's looking to start a business? Well, if you can't sell, if you can't influence, if you can't persuade, good luck trying to get your business off the ground. I'm not talking about just your customers. I'm talking about the bankers, the people with venture capitalists, your vendors, your credit card processor, the people who work for you. How do you get people to work for you excited? How do you get them excited? How do you get them to want to buy into your vision? At the highest level, what sales really is, it's the transference of emotion. And the emotion you're transferring is this emotion of certainty. That someone feels certain, yeah, it's a good thing, it's going to help me, it's going to fill my need. When you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to start a business and you're recruiting people, well, you're selling people on your vision for the future, your vision for this company. If you can't do that, good luck trying to get great people to work for you. It's nearly impossible, which is why you always see, the people, if they say, oh, he's a visionary. Well, that's true, but typically not only are they visionaries, they also possess the ability to sell the vision to other people, to inspire them, to motivate them. So selling is not just like, people think of selling, oh, well, I'm not a salesman, I don't need to. Well, yes, you do. You need to learn how to influence. How about trying to get your kids to make their bed or do their homework or believe in the value of education? How about trying to get a landlord to give you a reduction on your rent or to extend the lease the way you want? How about trying to negotiate terms? You understand, it cuts to everything. So I always look at this, say, when I say I cracked the code on influence, what I really did essentially was I was, by working backwards almost, by saying I'm going to start at the end and go to the beginning, say what has to happen before someone says yes. I was able to take that and put it into this system that took the no-name, talentless guys and turned them into millionaires.
What do you think the minimum amount of money you want to make for your life? Like, what would be the minimum amount of money that you make every year that allowed you to live and do that content media site? What do you think?
Maybe 40,000, 50,000 pounds, maybe.
Great. So you're like, what is amazing about that, if that's where you're at, well then at this young of an age, and that's where you're at, and the fact that you're even here and it's just unbelievable amounts of content in written, audio, and visual form on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and podcast. And I will tell you, I would be flabbergasted in 3, 4, 5, 6 years, unless you suck, which you may. But if you don't suck, and you have that little of a financial need, right, which is remarkable, which is the biggest thing. Somebody here, I don't know if they're here, said, you made me realize I didn't need Rolexes and things of that nature, right? Like, the biggest reason so many of you will fail is your number for success is far greater than his. You think you need $1 million, which will then mean that you're gonna do a lot of things when you don't get $1 million very quickly that won't ever get you $1 million. So if you think what I just said is cool, which is bleed for 6 years in a row, you'll probably get sponsorship or sales of product to 40,000 a year. To me, that's what I did. I knew what I wanted. I was willing to give up my 20s for it. Gave them up. Gave them up. Somebody said it's difficult not to document right now. I'm like, but I didn't, right? They're like, what? Should I build my business or should I document? I'm like, both. He's like, well, I got to pick one. I'm like, build your business. Like, so if your ambitions are that humble, which they are, that's incredible. That excites me. Because by the way, here's the funny part. That's who I was too. I just needed 100,000 a year. Just, that seemed rich to me, right? Like I was like, cool, I'll be okay. Like I'll have a house, it's not, I just needed to play, I needed the game. And too many of you in here want the stuff, not the game. When you fall in love with the game, everything's different because you've already won. That's real. It sounds cliche, but it's real.
There's this governor on our lives, and it is a governor, and it's your identity. It's this internal, it's what you think you're worth. It's what you think you deserve. And the problem for good people, see, we all know someone right now in our life, or we have, who's not ethical, who's not a good person, who's winning, and you're like, I can't believe they're getting it, right? Why can't I? I'm a good person. I treat people well. I'm honest. Here's the reason why. By the way, the unethical person, eventually, karma, you reap what you sow, comes home to roost. But if you're a good person, this is so important people understand this, because it took me a long time. A good person in any endeavor will only take from it what they think they deserve, what they think they're worth. In other words, if there was a pizza here, You're a good person. You don't take all 12 pieces.
Right.
A good person thinks there should be an equitable distribution.
I'm a little bigger, so I might take 7 or 8. You know,
and I would arm wrestle you for it.
You would beat me.
I don't know about that. You're a moose. But long story short, what is that a good person will not take more from the table of life than they think they're worth or they think they deserve. And so you have this governor on your identity. So what happens is it's like a thermostat. Our lives get going. We start doing really well. If we're a 75 degreer, and our life gets to 85 and 90 degrees, unconsciously we don't know we're doing it. We start to cool life back down to get it back to where we're comfortable. The reverse is also true. When things start to go really bad and you're broke and you're struggling, you find a way to heat your life back up to what you think you're worth and you deserve. So the way we alter our life is, sure, we got to alter our behavior and our relationships and our circumstances, but the only way it's permanent is that we alter that governor, that thermostat, and we start to believe we're worth 85 degrees of life, 95 degrees of life, 110 degrees of life. And there's ways we can alter that.
How do we alter it?
A couple different ways. One is what you just said, is that you put yourself in circumstances that are demanding of you past what you think your capacity is, and when you succeed at them, you build a new water line. You do. You throw yourself out there past where you're comfortable, and you do an 85 degrees behavior, and you knock it out of the park, and you go, oh, your brain starts to believe it. Repetitiously, when you start doing that, you build a new line. Now you're 85 degrees. That's number one. The second way, though, is association. If you're around people, and whatever that endeavor is, if it's a sport you're in, or if it's a business, or your faith, or your peace, if you begin to associate with people who live in that space at a higher temperature than you, through association you get heated up.
Yeah.
And so if you're an athlete, for example, you're a 70-degree athlete, and you start training all the time with 85 and 90 degrees, your identity through osmosis goes up. If you're a person who's trying to improve their faith in their life or their personal peace about them, you all know this, you've seen it, when you start to hang around people that are a little bit more peaceful than you or meditate a little bit more, through that association, over time, the thermostat changes in that area. And so it's both behaving in a certain way, and then your associations usually change.
I believe that.
In the 18th century, there was something that spread across Europe and eventually made its way to America called puerperal fever, also known as the Black Death of childbed. Basically what was happening is women were giving birth and they would die within 48 hours after giving birth. This Black Death of childbirth was the ravage of Europe, and it got worse and worse and worse over the course of over a century. In some hospitals, it was as high as 70% of women who gave birth who would die as a result of giving birth. But this was the Renaissance. This was the time of empirical data and science, and we had thrown away things like tradition and mysticism. These were men of science, these were doctors. And these doctors and men of science wanted to study and try and find the reason for this Black Death of childbed, and so they got to work studying, and they would study the corpses of the women who had died. And in the morning they would conduct autopsies, and then in the afternoon they would go and deliver babies and finish their rounds. And it wasn't until somewhere in the mid-1800s that Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, father of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, realized that all of these doctors who were conducting autopsies in the morning weren't washing their hands before they delivered babies in the afternoon. And he pointed it out and said, guys, you're the problem. And they ignored him and called him crazy for 30 years. Until finally somebody realized that if they simply washed their hands, it would go away. And that's exactly what happened. When they started sterilizing their instruments and washing their hands, the Black Death of childbed disappeared. My point is, the lesson here is, sometimes you're the problem. We've seen this happen all too recently with our new men of science and empirical studiers and these men of finance who are smarter than the rest of us until the thing collapsed. And they blamed everything else except themselves. And my point is take accountability for your actions. You can take all the credit in the world for the things that you do right, as long as you also take responsibility for the things you do wrong. It must be a balanced equation. You don't get it one way and not the other. You get to take credit when you also take accountability.
It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. You know, Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or two in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability.
Dreams without goals are just dreams, and they ultimately fuel disappointment. Goals on the road to achievement cannot be achieved without discipline and consistency.
Nobody works harder than me inside the octagon, outside the octagon. I am a workhorse, so I'm going to enjoy the benefits of this life. I'm going to get myself a big mansion in Las Vegas. I'm going to get the soft top cars. I'm going to bring my whole team out. I'm going to spoil them and give them this life. Big steaks that size, we're eating every single night each. We're eating good, we're living good. It's human nature. Some people will sit and take positivity from that. They will look at that and take inspiration and inspire. It will inspire them to go and push for that. Others will shell up and critique it and be negative towards it. But one thing is for sure, those people will stay where they are. The people who take inspiration from it will rise up and also one day experience that life. So this is human nature. Some go one way, some go the other way. But I am enjoying my money, my hard-earned money that I have dedicated my life to.
Most people don't have a compelling vision for their own future. They don't. They move through life setting goals. And goals have no power. We're at this point, goals had power in 1959 when Earl Nightingale came with this idea of goal setting, and everyone's like, wow, I'm a goal-oriented person. And that was great. And it worked for like 20 years. Everyone set goals and they got results. But then all of a sudden, you set goals, and sometimes you hit them, sometimes you don't. Most times you don't. Okay, and that's okay. But goals almost became like a synonym for like, oh, I'm going to set a goal and who gives a shit what really happens afterwards. And it almost is synonymous with failure now, goal setting. There's something above, and I believe in setting goals, but there's got to be something above your goals. And that's your vision for the future. And it's not just about, it doesn't have like an ending point. It's about the world being a certain way. And that's inspiring to you. When you truly have a vision for your future that inspires you, you're going to jump up out of bed in the morning and feel great about going at life versus being miserable and going to a job you hate or living a life that doesn't empower you and just, every day moving through just almost like an automaton, not really, having the zest and the greatness of life. And I'm guilty. I've been there myself when I felt like I didn't really have a compelling vision for my own future and I felt like I was wallowing. But at least I'm conscious of that. Once you become conscious of that, you can consciously create a vision for your future. It doesn't happen in 1 minute or an hour. You write it down, you work on it when you finally hit on it, how you know you got it? When you read it back to yourself, your vision statement, and it moves you and you feel inspired. Okay? And so few people have that, and what happens is every human being is thirsty for a vision. Everyone is. And so few people have one. So what do? They gravitate towards someone who has a vision for the future because they want to be a part of a vision. Part of being a great entrepreneur is having that vision, being able to create the vision, and then sell that vision to other people, to get them to want to be inspired, to buy into it, to put in their time, their hard work, their elbow grease, to help you achieve your vision. If you're a smart entrepreneur, then you spread the wealth around, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Because it's fun, you're willing to work your face off.
Right.
And working your face off is actually the gateway. It's not the fun. The fun is the doorway that gets you to put in the work, that gets you the results. Because D-Rock loves filming, like the 24/7 nature of what he does is what so many kids wanna film and do this, but they don't wanna, it's not fun enough for them. You have to love it. So, the cost of entry now is, understand? You have to love, like for me, building brands, whether it's my own brand, brands for other people, other things, the wine, it's so the only thing I give a shit about that I'm willing to put in the 19 that it takes.
Right.
Because the problem is now with the internet, like we were just saying, being the middleman, and everybody can play, there's some kid in Kansas City who's gonna put in the 19.
100%. Right. Might have put in 20.
And I don't want any of you little to take my Now what's amazing is though, the biggest thing I didn't know is that's some fun, but there's so much that all those little that are gonna put in the 19 are gonna get theirs too, and that makes me happy.
Yeah.
So I would say fun's a great gateway to, fun is the precursor to ridiculous amount of work, which then gets you there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm in meetings a lot. My calendar gets very full with those, and then at night, after the kids have gone to bed, I'm on email a great deal. I get messages during the day. That's my chance to give long responses. And then over the weekend, I send a lot of mail as well. I take 2 weeks a year to just go off and read and think, where I'm not interrupted by work or anything else. I'm just solidly trying to think about the future, and people get to send me things to read as part of that so-called Think Week. So it's a nice mix of things. About 25% of the time then I'm out traveling around, meeting with customers, Europe, Asia, and that sort of helps me think, okay, do we have the right priorities? What are people responding well to, and what would they like to see us do better?
Don't expect anything. Like expect the worst, and you know, if you obviously still want to do this, then go ahead and do it. And you know, I really did expect the worst. I was like, you know what? If nobody cares, if you know, my first album flops, if all my songs flop, I don't care. I'm still gonna do this because I want to do this for me. And so I was perfectly ready for none of it to happen. And you know, so it's the fact that, you know, people connected to Havana and that people are connecting to Never Be the Same, and people are just connecting to my music is super, it's like the best feeling ever.
We took a lot of pride in trailblazing and how the game was played back at that time through, we would intimidate teams and we would want to dominate teams, but also too, we also had the thought process that a team was never going to outwork us. We're going to be the hardest working team in the country.
The secret code for everybody is keep your dream alive, because it might come true someday. This is what the secret.
What kills great businesses, if you look at, I do believe in looking at history, and I like to study failure, actually. And my partner says, all I want to know is where I'll die, so I'll never go there. And we want to see what has caused businesses to go bad. And the biggest thing that kills them is complacency. I mean, you want a restlessness, a feeling that, you know, that somebody's always after you, but you're going to stay ahead of them. You always want to be on the move. And when you've got a great business, you know, like Coca-Cola, which is, there aren't any like Coca-Cola, but you really, the danger would always be that you rest on your laurels. But I see none of that, obviously, at Coca-Cola. But that is the key, to compete the same way when you've got 1.8 billion servings being sold daily as when you were selling, you know, 10 a day. And that restlessness, that belief that tomorrow's more exciting than today, you know, you just have to have it permeate the organization.
I mean, I had to. I wanted to be open about it, as I'd been from the very beginning. It was, from an athlete's perspective, it was one of the toughest things that I had to go through. And I feel like sharing that feeling that I had and the vulnerability that I had to carry myself with. And for someone that's so strong and like mentally tough and have always, I mean, at 6'2", like, you know, passionate about what she does, it felt really small for one of the first few times in my life where I didn't want to write. I didn't want to continue writing the book. It took a long time to put those words onto paper. And I felt that was important. It's part of my journey. It's part of the reason why my book is called Unstoppable, because I've had this mentality from a very young age that no matter what is thrown at you, there's going to be roadblocks and you have to overcome them, and you can.
Most people have a belief about what their real potential is no matter what you tell them. And that affects how much action they take. And of course that affects the result. And then ironically, that result reinforces their belief. And then that belief affects it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say a person has unlimited potential, we all agree. But they take little action, little results. Why? Because they have to start with a problem with their belief. They don't believe it's really going to happen for me. Maybe for Frank Kearns because he's got the cool hair and stuff, or maybe it's for you because you're so driven, but it's not me. Maybe Tony Robbins because he's a freak, got these big teeth. Whatever their thought process is, right? They got this thing, right? But what happens is, if you believe that there's very little potential, how much action are you going to take? Nothing, little. And when you take little potential with a little action, what kind of results do you get? Lousy little results. And when you get little results, what does that do to your belief? You go, see, I told you this was a waste of time, told you this wouldn't work. And then what happens? You tap even less potential. You take even less action. You get even worse results, and your belief gets even weaker. And this sucker feeds on itself until you are in the downward spiral. It's
poisonous.
It's poisonous and it's self-fulfilling. Now, what if something could happen that could come along and fill you with a sense of absolute certainty? Not like I believe, but where you know. In you guys' case, mine as well, we knew because we had to. Because we burned the boats. There was no other option. We had to find a way. We weren't going to live that way. We all did it in different ways and for different reasons, but in essence, that was it. If you get yourself in a state of certainty that this is going to work, I'm going to find a way, and if this doesn't work, I will make the way, then you tap a lot more potential. And when you're certain in your potential, you take massive action. When you take massive action, you really believe in something, you get great results. When you get great results, your brain goes, see, I told you I was a stud. I told you this thing would work out. Now you're even stronger. You tap more potential, take greater action, greater results. That's how you went from $300 in a week to $2,500 in 5 days to $100,000 in a month to $1 million in a day. Same thing with you. And we get momentum. That's why the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Now some people go out and they go, well, I'm going to take a bunch of action. All right, I'm going to open this product. I'm going to try it. And they'll say to you, I even did it. But it's like a salesman who goes and knocks on the door, and he knocks on 100 doors and says,
you don't want one of these, do you?
Yeah, exactly right. And even if he doesn't say it verbally, his face says it because he doesn't believe it's going to work. So his voice, his body, the execution is so weak. Maybe if he talks to 100 people, somebody's going to buy out of pity. They don't want his kids to starve, right? But he's not going to get the result. So the core difference in people is how do you produce certainty when the world isn't giving it to you? You go out and you try. In your case, you're $100,000 in debt and nothing's working. How do you keep yourself going? The way you did it, the way I did it, the way you're doing it, we may not have done it consciously, is we didn't change our potential. That was there. And it wasn't even taking more action. Taking more action with a belief it's not going to work, it's not going to change anything. We got results in our head that made us feel certain as if it had already happened.
It's all in the mindset. When you get up in the morning, you do what you normally do. I would eventually say a lot of you here probably turn on your cell phones, your computers, and what's the latest email, what's the latest text that comes in? You start your day off like that. That's your mindset. Try this. Get up in the morning, do whatever you have to do. Don't turn the computer on. Don't turn the TV on. Go right back to bed again. Either lay there or sit there and just bring the universe to you. Here's how you do it. You just be. It's virtually impossible when you first do it because 1,000 thoughts come through your head. We're human beings. So what you do is you're sitting in bed, look at the wall, look at the off TV set, look at the ceiling, look at the door, look at something in the room that gets your attention, and just look at it and just be for a couple of minutes. Not 10 minutes, not 20 minutes, not 2 days, just be. When your mind wanders, find another spot in the room to look at so you're back in present time, even for a couple of minutes. Now go about your day. Don't think about what you're going to do. For that split few minutes, you're now becoming part of a universe, which is also part of global thinking.
Only one way to get rich, and that's quick. That's not a get-rich-quick scheme, though. Because the world's too expensive to get rich slowly. But what I mean by getting rich quick is that there are certain things you have to know on the inner game of wealth, how you manage your emotional state, your beliefs, your standards, your focus, and in the outer game, entrepreneurship, sales, marketing, how to develop multiple streams of income. It takes time. That's where the hard work, because a lot of hard work goes into getting this lined up and that lined up. But once you have it all lined up and you've done the work, then you can make money very, very quickly. So it's not a scheme, but you got to get rich quick and you have to put the work in. I say, if you don't want to work hard, good luck. I mean, I don't know any rich people that don't work really, really hard. That's the bottom line. So hard work and knowing stuff, skills.
There's no quick fix, easy
no,
fix.
It's not, again, when you get rich, it happens quickly, but there's a lot of work that goes up to that point before the money starts pouring in. That's the distinction that I think a lot of people who are not wealthy, they don't get that. They think that you accumulate money a little bit at a time. It doesn't work that way. You work, don't get the result, and bam, one last piece of the puzzle clicks in, whether it's not knowing how to close, and it all happens quickly.
I think that what I took from the film, to me, that was interesting, because again, it's my life and it's been 35 years of just living, is it's kind of really sucked at times and how hard it's been. I know it's been hard, of course, but to be good at anything is hard. I mean, I'm sure everybody in this room and anybody watching thinks like my life's been hard too. It's true. And if somebody were to put a documentary together about your life, it would probably be similar, and that life is hard. It's what you do with it.
Fascinates me about human beings, and it fascinates me about myself, is that we have such a high tolerance for suckiness.
Isn't it crazy?
As long as the suckiness is a routine. But the second you get thrown out of your routine, or the second that, whether it's because you lose a job or somebody moves or somebody dies or somebody breaks up with you or you break, like all of a sudden that awakens the courage in you to make a change. Because you know, either you have no choice or now you got a problem to solve.
Yeah.
But fighting that inertia of life is the most difficult thing in the world. I ended up getting a job with a law firm because it was the path of least resistance.
In Boston.
In Boston. I hated it because I went from being in the courtroom to writing briefs all day.
Got it.
And luckily I got pregnant with our first daughter, who just is starting college, which makes me feel so ancient. I just want to like punch myself in the face that I have a 18-year-old freshman in college.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I got pregnant with her, and when she was born, I had horrific postpartum depression.
Wow.
I mean, the really scary kind, where you can't be alone with the baby. You're on crazy meds that turn you, not the kind you take recreationally.
Yeah.
Like, these are the kind that like turn you into a zombie. And it was a really scary thing. And I when I kind of came out of the 8-week trance of that, I looked up at Chris and said, I've made a decision. And he said, okay, what would that be? And I said, I don't ever want to answer the question, what do you do for a living? With the response, I'm a lawyer. And he said, okay. You realize we've just bought this house and we have a kid and we have bills to pay. And he said, so here's the deal. You've got exactly 4 weeks before your maternity leave is over. You need to make $60,000. I don't care what you do for a living. That's your problem. Go solve it. And the night before I was supposed to, so I networked like a crazy person. Because again, if you're a human being with a problem, you'll solve it.
Yeah.
And so if it matters enough to you. And so I got a job, and this was the first .com boom in Boston. I got a job the night before I was supposed to go back.
The best piece of advice that I was given when I started my modeling career was make sure that you okay, so there was a lot of things that were given to me because, you know, everybody likes to give you advice. One thing that stayed with me is you're as good as your last job. And so every job I treated as if it were my last job. And I think that that kind of gave me a reputation of hardworking, ready to do whatever it takes to get this shot. And I think that that's very important in any industry.
That who I am is not only what I have, but who I am is what I do, what I accomplish. And so we spend a big hunk of our lives believing that the way that we become, quote, successful, happy, fulfilled, self-actualized, whatever it might be, is on the basis of what I accomplish, what my resume looks like, how many promotions I get. And so we send our children off to school and we ask them to learn to identify themselves on how much they get and what they accomplish. Your grades become more important than what it is that you are studying. What you own, what clothes you wear, what labels you have, and so on. And we become obsessed with this kind of absurdity. And this is the false self at work.
I spoke at an education summit for Microsoft. I also spoke at an education summit for Apple. At the education summit for Microsoft, I would say that 70% of the executives spent about 70% of their presentations talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple Education Summit, 100% of the executives spent 100% of their presentations talking about how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One is playing this way, and one is playing that way. One is playing finite, and the other one is playing infinite. Guess which one gets frustrated. So at the end of my talk at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the new Zune when it was a thing. And let me tell you, this thing was spectacular. It was the most elegant piece of technology I'd ever used. The user interface was incredible. The design was spectacular. I absolutely loved it. It was easy to use, and it was bright and gorgeous and fantastic. It didn't work on iTunes, which is a different problem, so I couldn't use it, but it was amazing. And elegant. My God, it was elegant. So I'm sitting in the back of a taxi with a very senior Apple executive, sort of employee number 12 kind of guy. And, you know, I like to stir pots. So I turned to him, I said, you know, Microsoft gave me their new Zune. And it is so much better than your iPod Touch. And he turned to me and he said, I have no doubt. Conversation over. Because the infinite player understands sometimes you're ahead and sometimes you're behind. Sometimes your product is better and sometimes it's worse. The goal isn't to be the best every day. The goal isn't to outdo your competition every day. That's a finite construction. If I had said to Microsoft, I've got the new iPod Touch and it's so much better than your Zune, they would have said, can we see it? What does it do? React, 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 react. Finite players play to beat the people around them. Infinite players play to be better than themselves. To wake up every single day and say, how can we make our company a better version of itself today than it was yesterday? How can we create a product this week that's better than the product we created last week? We also have to play the infinite game. It's not about being ranked number one. It's not about having more followers on Twitter than your friends. It's not about outdoing anyone. It's about how to outdo yourself. It's not about selling more books or getting more TED views than somebody else. It's about how to make sure that the work that you're producing is better than the work you produced before. You are your competition. And that is what ensures you stay in the game the longest. And that is what ensures you find joy. Because the joy comes not from comparison, but from advancement.
The reason that most people are not successful or not wealthy is not because they set their goals too high and miss them. It's because they set them too low and hit them. Get that? It's not because you set your goals too high and miss. You set your goals too low and you hit them. And you get caught up in the average daily struggle of averagism and mediocrity. That's what kills people. Everybody raise your hand for a second, please. Raise your hand. Now raise it as high as you can. I'm going to crouch so I can see, okay? Now just raise it a bit higher, everyone. Higher? Why the hell did that happen? I say raise it as high as you can, and everyone says, okay, then a little bit higher. Okay, well, if you really mean it, right? You get it? It's that extra inch. That's where you want to set your goal. Not pie in the sky and out of control like it's never going to happen, because that's a load of crap too. People that set those sort of goals, they abandon those goals, and we'll get to that later. But the idea here is you want to set the goals just above your comfort zone. So now think about it for a second. Think about your goals right now. How do you set them? Are you setting them very low and hitting them? If that's the case, then give yourself a 10. Are you setting goals that don't inspire you? Some people set goals that might be high, but they're crappy goals. They're not the sort of goals that make you jump out of bed in the morning, make you want to go to work for yourself, to secure the future, not just for you, but for your family. So you don't have to compromise or acquiesce to anybody unless you love them, unless you want to. That's freedom. You know, money's just a mechanism to get there.